All right, welcome students. I want to give you a rundown on some simple or some basic vector animation. So this is what we're looking at today. This is my video that we're going to create, and I'll play it through a few times just to show you what it is. So that's what we're going to be making. So let me hop over to Illustrator. This is where we are going to start. And what I like to do is, as much as possible, create all of your vector drawings in Illustrator, and then we will bring them over to After Effects to animate. So take this into preview mode. You see it's a pretty simple drawing. And what I did, just to kind of show you two different ways to animate, is the legs are made up of a shape. So these are obviously vector shapes. And then the arms are made up of vector paths. So it's just a path. And I put a pretty good sized stroke on the arms, and I put a rounded end cap on them. Otherwise, you'll see that I guess this is a path as well, the mouth is, although we don't really animate that. The head and the body and everything else really is built on shapes. You will notice something a little bit odd, and that is that the shadows for the trees, I have these inside of my artboard in Illustrator. If you put these on the outside where they're supposed to go, when you bring them into After Effects, After Effects is going to be, the video will be built based on the artboard size here, so it will cut these off. So I bring these in, it doesn't really matter where, just make sure they're inside of your artboard. So the artboard that I made here is the exact size of my video. This is set up in pixels. So this is going to be exactly 1920 pixels wide by 1080 pixels tall, and that would be full HD. It's not full like 4K or 5K, but it is high definition, and this will give you a pretty good size video. Okay, so one thing that's important in Illustrator is you'll notice that based on how I'm going to animate all of these different elements, I have them on specific or individual layers. So I have taken the time to create a new layer for each thing that I may want to animate. You can see like the tree is a separate tree. The shadow on each tree has a separate layer. The sun is on a separate layer. And especially for the body, I have the body, the left arm, the right arm on separate layers, the left leg, the right leg on separate layers, and the head and the mouth are on separate layers. There was a time when I thought I might like make the mouth smile or something, or grimace as it kicks, so I put that on a separate layer. If I were to turn all of these invisible except for the background, you will see that the background itself, since I'm going to just use this as one background, the shadows and the sun will move, but none of this will move. I have that just set or on one flat layer in the background. If I wanted to, I could pull the clouds off if I wanted them to slowly move across, or if I wanted the trees to kind of, or the bushes here in the background to kind of sway. I could put all that on separate layers, but here I chose not to. So all of these are on separate layers, as you can see. Okay, so real simple. Once I have everything on here, I must have an issue with Illustrator. Don't worry about it. For some reason, these weren't showing up. Now they are. It just must be a preview issue. No big deal. Okay, so next step is to make sure that you have this saved. I did use RGB for my color profile because this is going to be a video that will be played on a screen. So the opposite of that would be if it was for print, I would do CMYK. So again, I built this 1920 pixels wide, 1080 tall, and RGB. Everything in here is vector. And I think we're ready to save this and move over to animate it in After Effects. So this is just a basic AI file. We'll save it that way. And then I'm going to hop over to After Effects. Let me hide this first. And in After Effects, I'm going to, let me do a new window here. I'll open a project. So what I'm going to do, actually I want to do it a different way. I want to show you what I prefer to do is this is my Illustrator file right here on my desktop. And what I'm going to do is drag that over into the project window. And then that's going to ask me, what do you want to do with this? And you really have two options: to deal with it as individual footage or make a composition out of it. So in order for me to have After Effects recognize all of those specific layers that I built so I can animate those individual layers, I want to do a composition, and then it will ask me to do it based on layer size or document size. Both of these pretty much work okay right now because I have both the document size and all the layers are usually on, or my largest layer, sorry, is going to be on, built on 1080 by 1920. So I can just choose layer size. Click OK, and that is going to build the composition. And this composition now, if I just double click on this, I know sometimes in After Effects you will drag things down into the timeline, but since you already built a composition, I'm just going to double click on that, and that is going to add all of the specific layers that I built in Illustrator to the timeline in After Effects, and these will be ready to be animated. So before we dig into this, I think a couple of important things. If I do Command K or composition settings, I want to look in here to make sure that that size actually did come across okay. 1920 by 1080. I will usually set this up as 30 frames per second. That's good for animation and for all your marketing videos. And the duration, I already knew this, but I started mine at 10 seconds. So that's what all I want for this animation. The background, you can really make it whatever color you want. I'm going to make mine white. But one thing that's good to remember is that white really only lives in After Effects. And we can make this white, but we're going to put a solid behind here in the timeline and make the background a solid white. So when we export it, it has that white way in the background. It doesn't really matter for most of my stuff, but let's just say I had like this blue on transparency and we needed something behind it to make sure it was the right color blue. We'd want to have white behind it so that we got the right transparency or the right transparent blue. And then if you haven't already named your composition, I would name this. I just called mine After Effects Vector Animation Basics. And that'll be good. So let's pause there and then we'll come back and we'll start to animate this. Okay, our next step is going to be to take our individual layers, our vector layers from Illustrator, and put them into a shape layer or make them into a shape layer that After Effects can animate or recognize. So you could actually just keep things the way they are, and there are plenty of animations where you just take a solid vector shape like this tree. Let me go to like tree 1 here. And if you don't want to drill down and move the individual vector points or the little handles, you can just set this tree into motion and do whatever you want with it just as it is. But you can't drill down and like move the individual pieces or make this into an oval or move the individual pieces of the trunk. So what I find it easiest to do is I'm just going to take all of these and select all of my layers. I'm not going to do the background because that one I'm not going to move individually. And I'm going to right click on these and go down to create shapes from vector layer. So once I do that, you'll see all of my layers are converted to a shape layer in After Effects. It still keeps my previous layers from Illustrator, but you'll see it puts a new layer in there with a star next to it. So now I have all of these new layers that I can use to drill down and find the paths. I'll show you what I mean in just a little bit. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to select all of these Illustrator layers, These are still here if you want to go back to them. And I'm going to put these at the very bottom. Notice how it also made those invisible once it made these new shape layers. So let's start with the body. And I'm going to expand this layer to get to the controls. Now you'll see that not only do I have the standard transform controls, I also have this new control called content. So I'm going to open this up, and you will see that there's a lot of frustration around the internet as to why it does this. After Effects, notice it puts a box around it here, and then it also has a path here. So there's a group in here. There's actually a double group in here. My best guess would be that while it does frustrate some people, you have to ungroup all of this. What it's most likely doing is for your composition, it's aligning every vector shape in here to your outside 1920 by 1080 shape so that it knows where to put all these individual pieces. So I'm going to go into this first little group one, right click or control click on that and ungroup. And then I'm going to go to this, so kind of anywhere you see a group here, and I'm going to ungroup that too with a right click. And now you see I have a merged path, path 1, 2, and 3. Well, if I take these away and this merged path, I am left with the body shape or the basic vector path. So I can take these three, select them, and just hit delete. And then this path here, I am left with just this individual path. And this is something now, notice I have the controls on here to add keyframes to it. I can change these actual individual anchor points and set those into motion with this path. So, and we'll do a little bit more of that later when I show you how to do the leg. But the bottom line is you should go through all of these layers that you're going to have to, you're going to want to drill down and get to the individual points. So in my instance here, this would be the arms and the legs basically. So I will open up those and make sure that let's just do one more. If I go into the content, I'm going to go to ungroup here where I see a group. And actually now you'll notice on this one, that there was only one ungroup. And that's because this is just a path. It's just a line from Illustrator and not a shape from Illustrator. So that one's pretty much done. I can drill down to this path, and you see that's the path for the right arm. So go through all of these and make sure that you've separated them, ungrouped them, and deleted the things you don't need. And then once it's nice and clean, we will start to animate the individual anchor points. All right, so we've cleaned up all these layers and we have them kind of drilled down so it's just the path that we can find in there. And if you wanted to, all of these all of these Illustrator files that we have down here in the timeline, you can just select those and delete them. The file or the folder here is sitting in your project folder. So you could always grab these individually and bring them back down here if you wanted to. But I kind of like how this just keeps it nice and clean in my timeline. All right, so I'm going to go, if I select back in here, I'm going to go up here to Layer New and add a solid. And this solid is usually going to be defaulted to 1920 by 1080 or what I've built there. We can just leave this as a white solid. If you'd like to name it a background, white background. We'll make it white, square pixels is fine, and then you can also click to make it comp size, but it already is. So we'll click OK, and that'll drop the white background in the top of my layers. So what I want to do is pull it all the way to the bottom, so then it just sits behind everything. And if I were to drop opacity in something, that white would be there, and it will stay there until or all the way through the render. Okay, so these shadows, remember I pulled the tree shadows into the inside so they wouldn't, or inside of the artboard and inside of my frame here so they wouldn't get cut off. So now I can move them back where they kind of really are supposed to go. Drop this one here. Oops. And this one here. And I am using, if you look up here, we have our tool palette. If you don't see that, you can always go to Window and Tools here, or Command 1, and that will bring that up. But I'm over here on the Selection tool, so I can move things around. And then to deselect everything, I'll just click in the background. So I see that I might want to nudge these just a little bit. I can do this with my arrow keys if I really want to kind of finesse them. And you could zoom in if you wanted to as well. Okay, so everything is set up the way we want it. You can also see I brought in my my sound effect too, the whip crack. We'll get to that in a little bit as well. So the first thing I want to do is I want to set this person in motion and move them forward a little bit and move them back. I'm sorry, move them just forward to make that kick. So you've done this already with some of the other videos I've shown you in class. But if I go to the body outlines, I can go to transform, and here you have your standard set of 5. So I can change the position of this. So what I'm going to do is click my stopwatch, start my position here with this set keyframe, and then move forward just a little bit. This whole kick is probably only going to take maybe about a second. So let's just start there. Of course, we can always adjust this. And then with the position, I'm going to grab this and just move it forward a little bit. So that sets the second keyframe, and now I have this body moving forward. Okay, so we want everything else to move forward with it as well. So we're going to use this parent and link right here. So the body outline, that already has motion in it, so I want to basically make everything else a child of that, or link it to the parent. So if I take all of these layers, and I'm going to select oops, not the trees, sorry. Just the right arms, left arms, the head, and the mouth. And I'm going to select body outlines. So that is number 4, or the layer number 4 on here. Once I select that, all of these now will move with the keyframe and the kind of transition that I put in here. So it makes it a little bit easier so that I don't have to go in and try to animate all of these and align with all of these. I can just pick one object that's kind of a centralized object that's going to move, and then everything else can go along with that. All right. So the next thing I want to do is, you remember I have the leg kind of kicking up in that karate kick video. So I'm going to find that left leg. Sorry, this is the right leg here. I'm reversed. So the right leg, and I just click on that to, oh, you know, I have these backwards. So that's okay. We'll go to the left leg, and the left leg is going to kick. We could change the names, but I won't do that. So I'm going to open this up, and there's a lot of nuancing that happens when you do a lot of these kicks and when you do a lot of the vector point animations or the anchor points. So I'll show you kind of the basics, and then you could spend, like I did on this karate kick, like maybe an hour, hour and a half kind of finessing how it looks, finessing the movements. But I'm going to give you the gist of it and the basics, and you'll be able to take it from there with whatever your video looks like. So I'm going to kind of drill down and open this up until I find that path. So I can change individual things on this path. If I click here, you will see that this, or the anchor points come up. If I click off of them and then click on just one, now I have access to these individual anchor points, and I can set those into animation with this path line in my timeline with keyframes. So the first thing I'm going to do, though, is I'm going to click off of this, and I'm going to go into transform. Because these regular set of kind of effects that I can apply to things, I'm going to start with that. So the first thing I want to do is, I know I want this leg to hinge up to make that kick. And I can nuance kind of these individual points later. But what I want to do is I want to hinge it on the hip. So you see the center point right here is down on the knee. It's not what I want. So I'm going to go up here, to our pan behind, but remember this is also the anchor tool. So if I click on here, I can grab that anchor point and we'll move it up so it rotates on the hip. All right, so if I come back down here, now I want to go to rotation, and I'm going to let this move all the way over. These are just decisions you'll make. I feel like I'll let it kind of move over first, do a step, and then this leg will kick. So if I move this over maybe to 1 second, now I'm going to click rotation. I'm going to start that rotation at 1 second, click, and move this over just a little bit more. So really now this is stopped when it comes over. Right where it stops at 1 second, I'm going to move it a little bit past there, and I'm going to put another keyframe in here, click inside of this rectangle with my rotate tool, and I can rotate that leg up. And I can put it probably about like right here, because I know I'm going to bend the knee up a little bit, but I'm going to do that with the anchor points. So now you can see I have it coming over, and I did a walk in mine. You can see that in the original, but we don't have to cover every little individual step, or this tutorial video will be way too long. But we can make it step over, and then it'll kick up. So I swivel it up first, and then if I go back to this anchor point in here, and there's really no magic to this, you just kind of have to start where you think it's going to start to come up, where the leg would come up. And as soon as that starts to swivel up, I'm going to start to move these anchor points. So now I'm going to go to my path, click to start that animation, set a keyframe here, and as I move over, what I can do is I can set another keyframe here, and then I can start selecting these individuals. Oops, I have the wrong tool here. I can start selecting these individual keyframes. Oops. Path. And I can start to move these individually. I keep that leg kind of thick there. So now you will see as I come through, as the leg raises or swivels forward, the knee also comes up. And if I wanted to, on the same position here, I could move both of these. So now it comes over, swivels up. As it still swivels, now right when I get to the top here, I'm going to come to right where the leg snaps here. And I want to set a new keyframe. And I'm going to drop these down just a little bit. And I'm going to move these up. And I'm going to grab the handles, kind of move it down. I'm okay if the leg bends, kind of looks like it snaps up just a little bit. So now, as you see, it'll move forward. That leg will come up. The knee will start to come up, and it'll snap kick. So as you can tell, there's obviously a lot of nuancing that I did in my short little video demo that I showed you, but this is the gist of it. I think I had actually another step in between here that I worked with the legs to rotate them and let the character step. And when they kick, that extends the leg all the way up and bends it, and you can see how I have changed the shape of this with a rotation, the whole leg, but then also with this path right here, as we drill down in here, manipulated these individual anchor points. So you're probably already seeing this. You're like, wow, doing this by individual anchor points and stuff, it can take a lot of time, a lot of keyframes and stuff. It's kind of the way we're doing it in After Effects, and that's how you have to do it. So you probably remember some of the videos examples I showed you in class where a lot of the storytelling videos, they don't get too deep into the individual anchor points because it does take a long time and sometimes it doesn't really add to the story. But if you use it sparingly, I think it has its purposes. I also just wanted to make sure that you understood it and knew how to do it. So let's do one more here before we move on. One more here would be to, I showed you how to do a shape here, but the other one would be, oh, I probably have these labeled wrong too, but yeah, so this one's labeled left arm, but it's technically the right arm. So if I open this, this is just the line or the stroke here. So what I did in my video is I kind of had the arm come forward and then swivel up. So this one's a little bit easier, where when I get, oops, I'm going to open up the left leg. That just shows me where the keyframes are, so it helps me guide where I put the new ones. So let's just say when I get about right here and that leg starts to come up, I want the arm to be up already or about in the same position. So right here, I'm going to set a rotation again, keyframe, move it forward just a little bit, and I want to set a new keyframe. I'm going to look for my anchor point there, so I'm going to grab my anchor point tool. I want this to hinge on the shoulder. Go back here, and now, oops, on the rotate, now that second anchor point, I'm going to move it forward kind of like this. And then as it, right about when it comes to the end there, I'm going to switch to my path, and I'm going to set a new anchor point on that path. That sets the elbow kind of where I want it to be. And then as we move forward here, I'm going to set another anchor point on that path, go in here, make sure I'm on my selection tool, and I'm going to grab this one here and just rotate it up. So it kind of comes up, the arms are usually up like this when you have a kick to stabilize your body. So now what happens is it will come over and this will swivel up. And if I feel like that swivel isn't what I want, I might even extend this out just a little bit or higher. And if I wanted to, I could also drop the elbow because that might drop a little bit too. So now I come over and that elbow comes up. And you get the gist of it. So I would nuance that probably so it looks like it comes out a little bit farther. So now I have everything moving over. The arm comes up, and then the kick comes out. Now, of course, I will put this other leg a little bit farther back because that would put your balance on here, but we're just focusing on moving and animating these shapes first, and then now the individual paths. Okay, so why don't we give you a little bit of time? What I would do is I'm going to go and kind of work on some of this, and this is where you would nuance it, move it over, and when we come back here, I'm going to take a break. When we come back, I'm going to show you how to drop the sound in, and then we'll move the sun across the sky and move the shadows at the same time. Okay, so I wanted to show you how to have kind of two things happening at once and do a little bit of a different type of animation. So I have the sun kind of moving on an arc across the sky, and then the tree shadows will move along with that. So I did notice that I messed up. This is always best to skew. If you just go back to the layers without making them into shape layers. So what I did is I just deleted the two tree shadow layers here, went back up into my folder, which is always up here, grabbed the two shadows and pulled them down. and then position them where they're supposed to go. So the first thing we want to do for these shadows is you can see they don't really overlap and they're the same gray as the road that the character is going to kick on. So you have both in After Effects. You have almost all the same controls as you have in like Illustrator and Photoshop. So I'm going to right click with both of these layers selected, and you can see these are the shadows. Right click and just go to blending mode, and here you will see what you are accustomed to seeing. So I'm going to choose multiply, and you'll see that that will put both of these on multiply, and they go over everything. And if I have both of these selected, I can also make the opacity, let's maybe drop that to like 60 so that they're not quite so dark. So that'll give us kind of a starting point here. Okay, so let's start with the first tree here. And first things first, what we want to do is we want to open up our controls, and let's move this anchor point here up so that it skews right on the base of the tree. And that will skew across. So what I want to do is control click on this tree, and I want to go to Effect, and I'm going to choose a second transform. You can see under the transform here it doesn't have skew. When I add an effect with a second one, it does have skew here. It also gives me another set of controls up here, and these show me like where my anchor point and position are, and I can do the skew axis, stuff like that. So through a lot of trial and error, maybe like 5-10 minutes, so be patient, I found that the skew axis on here is really best at 90 degrees. And you could also come down here and just click and type that in. And then I also found that these two center points here need to be up here. So you can just click on anchor point, this little target, move it up here where you want it to skew. The second one, the position, move that one up here. And now these two anchor point position for the skew effect, that aligns now with what I did on this layer with my anchor point on the base of that tree. So all that's left is I need to go to Skew, click on my stopwatch and set my first point. Come over here all the way across 10, click and set my second, and I found that like 39 was pretty good. So now you will see with the opacity dropped with overlay as the effect, now it will skew right on that base as the sun moves across the sky. So let's do the same over here. If you wanted to, we could start with just clicking on effects from this tree here, and we could Command C to copy, and that should transfer down. If I select this layer, Command V, that should put the same effects in here, so I don't have to redo everything. Let's see how that worked out. Yeah, so you can see how that kind of turned. I may want to nuance that just a little bit, but I don't know, that's actually pretty good. It just gets a little bit wider, I notice, at the base here. Otherwise, everything else should be good. My opacity is at 60, and I have the blending mode set. So the last thing I really need to do is let's go all the way back to the beginning here, and let's find the sun. Let's open up the sun, and I want the sun to kind of move in this arc across the sky. So that's pretty simple. We've done that before. I'm going to start with a position here, and all the way across to 10, I want to set a second position. That second position, I'll just pull it over. What I'm doing here is I see at 10 where this line kind of comes up is where the sun should be, somewhere in between both of these. So this one kind of angles over this way. When I look at my perspective line, this one kind of comes up here. So I think I'll set it about right here. And then if I right click or control click on this, and I go to, if I go down to this little keyframe here and right click on it, I'm going to go to keyframe interpolation. And what I want to do is set the spatial one, the second one here, to auto. This is going to put, you notice right here, there's nothing to help me arc this. If I put this on auto Bezier, it'll put a little handle out here. And now I can grab that handle and pull it up into an arc. So if I select this, let's save. Now if I go back, the shadows will move. My person's still kicking, but the shadows are going to move nice and slow as the sun arcs across the sky. All right, so class, I think that's enough to really get you going. You understand how to work with the paths and how to rotate them, and then how to set into action individual anchor points on a shape, and also to do the same to set into motion this arm, which is a path, but also set in the anchor points on there, and then set into motion the anchor points here to move that arm up. We talked about parent and kind of link, the parent and child, where everything moves the way the body moves here. You'll see in my video I dressed it up a little bit. I put a shadow underneath here that moves, and then the kick goes, the shadow goes with the kick. We also showed how to do something here on an arc and then have these two skew along with it, using these different types of effects that we can find when we just control click on something on a layer. It'll add an effect like a blending mode to it. You can also do things in here like layer styles. You can do drop shadows like you're probably accustomed to seeing in Photoshop, Illustrator, stuff like that. And you have different effects in here too where we put the second transform on to get that skew. All right, the last thing I want to do is show you how to add the whip crack. So I found this on Pixabay, copyright free. I'm going to drag it down here. I like to put mine at the bottom. Some people like to put theirs at the top. Doesn't really matter where it goes. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to open this up and open it so I can see the waveform in here. And you will see the sound kind of wave here, and you see where the crescendo is here. There's like a little bit of a whip before it, and then the real hard whip. So I want to isolate just this part right here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go find that leg that kicks, and I'm going to open that one so I can kind of see exactly where everything goes. Reminder that you can always expand your timeline so you can see things a little more nuanced in here. So this, the bottom timeline, I can always adjust this, move it. In the bottom timeline, I can always adjust where the sound goes. And if I don't want all of this sound to play, which I don't, I can just grab the ends of this layer and move this in. So if I move it to about right where that kick starts, we'll see if I want to keep all of this. We'll see how long I have. And this depends on how you've nuanced your kick. So if I come up like to about right here, I probably have from like here, this keyframe, right here, to this keyframe here. So as I move this over, I can probably fit some of that in there. But I think I might just have to skip that little precursor and start right here, move this over. And then what I want to do on this side is I'm going to move this way, way over here and kind of make it the same size as these two where the kick happens. But you'll notice that at the end in here, there's still going to be a sound. So I probably want to trail this off a little bit. So you'll remember, I'm just going to back up a few frames here. You remember that After Effects, the quiet conversation in the room or normal sound, that usually it sets that at 0. -44 is usually pretty close to dead silence. So in here, I'm just going to set in my sound file on the layer here, I'm going to set a keyframe right here. That's going to be at 0 decibels because that's like my quiet conversation. But then at the end, I'm going to drop this down to -44, which is kind of silence, and you'll see that comes off. So now let's play this through and we'll watch the kick and we'll see how that goes. All right, and you can see that my sound probably needs to move over just a little bit. And you can also see here that, I'll move it over even a little bit more. You can see how the nuancing has to happen here, where my kick actually goes up faster, so I would compress all these keyframes together to make the snap of the kick faster, and then I'll just align my sound with it. And we'd of course keep nuancing this so that it looks good, like in my final video. All right, that's it. We've learned a lot in here, so let's take this. And sorry I forgot the sound before as I was closing, but I went back and did the sound. So now you really should have everything you need to make your vector animation. All right, thank you.